So everyone on the call, thank you so much for taking your time out to be a part of this Lunch and Learn session. Classified Training and Development staff has taken on the opportunity to provide multiple Lunch and Learn sessions throughout the school year. We have received a lot of feedback about the timing of this Lunch and Learn, and so this session will be recorded and shared out for future use if you do have some friends who you know who are interested in this session but were not able to attend today. That is the theme moving forward, that we will record all of our Lunch and Learn opportunities for staffers, and we also are expanding our Lunch and Learn offerings to include larger hours or longer hours on multiple sessions. So thank you so very much for your time, and can't wait to get started with this session on work-life integration. Thank you for bearing with us.
All right, I so apologize for the technical difficulties here. Yeah, if you just want to get rid of my notes. So again, my apologies. Today, so survive to thrive, work-life integration. We're really talking about what it could look like to move from maybe this mode of survival to a more intentional work-life mode. Moving away from the idea of balance. Maybe you're familiar with the term work-life balance. And so we're going to kind of move away from that idea, talking more about how we can integrate our work lives and our home lives in a way that kind of allows us to thrive as workers or employees, allows us to thrive as family members, and then just as humans overall. So maybe just go ahead and think about one or two words that describe your current work-life situation. And if you're comfortable, if you would maybe go ahead and just chat them in. What are one or two words that describe your current work-life situation? Sometimes we might think chaotic or stressful. Both are running together, busy but organized. Thank you so much for everyone who's chatting in. Maybe it's just okay, comfortable, very overwhelming at times. Peaks and valleys, I love that. All right, if you want to go ahead and move to slide 3. So really what we are wanting to learn today is just the difference between work-life balance and work-life integration, right? Talking about how this idea of work-life integration can help you reduce stress and guilt and increase happiness and fulfillment. And then we'll talk about some strategies to achieve this work-life integration. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And so what is work-life balance, right? This is the old idea that we are kind of aiming to move away from, because what we know is that it doesn't really work and it's really hard to do, especially with advances in technology. You know, you can be reached with calls and emails all the time, anywhere, especially, you know, as folks are maybe working from home or having new job responsibilities. Chances are your job doesn't look like it did maybe 2 years ago. And so we know now that trying to keep everything in balance can lead to guilt, increased stress, right? And we know that these have negative effects on our health, like anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, just to name a few. And so again, moving away from this idea of work-life balance, where we were aiming to create barriers so that work and home didn't overlap at all. And we know that that's just not really possible. You can go to the next slide. And so moving towards this idea of work-life integration, what is it? It is synergy instead of balance, or a cooperation of the two elements, work and home, right? Managing boundaries so that the two can coexist. I love this next one, emphasizing gentle pivots rather than hard boundaries, right? Knowing that we're always going to need to pivot, and at different times in your life, different techniques or schedules are going to work and not work. Enjoying the time you spend working as well as enjoying the time that you're not working, and then just finding fulfillment in your personal life and in your work life. We can move to the next slide. So work-life integration is not an even split, right? It's not always splitting your time 50-50. It's not a lack of structure, and it's not never taking a break. And so a good example here is maybe you have an activity or a sporting event with a child or another family member. And so what work-life integration would look like is fully enjoying that event, right? You might need to check emails outside of your typical work day. That might be something that you just have to do. But in this example, you would take the time to do that before or after, but your focus would be primarily on that sporting event or activity while it's that time. So you could check your emails before or after, but refrain so from doing during the actual activity. Next slide. Right, and so this is just kind of a quote as we move into kind of some of the practicality of what work-life integration might look like. It's difficult to operate at high performance if you're not bringing your whole self to work. So less guilt equals less stress. Next slide. And then achieving work-life integration really requires self-advocacy. So acting authentically and really identifying what is important to you, and recognizing and acknowledging the different parts of your life. So work, home, community, as a whole being, there's so many things that make us who we are. And then being innovative, right? So being creative in how you are going to get things done in a way that is good, productive, less stressful for the people around you. Next slide. So this is kind of the practicality of it all. These are some strategies to help implement or work towards this idea of work-life integration. So define what success looks like to you? Asking some of the questions that are listed here. What does, an ideal work-life integration look like for you and your family? What are your goals at home and at work? And how do you allocate your time to help you meet those goals? Some other questions that you could take is that you could ask is, what will allow you time for creative projects? What would help you reduce stress that you feel leaving work at work? What will allow you to care or connect with friends and family members in a better way? And then it's taking, incremental steps that are in your control. Next slide. Number 2, setting clear boundaries. Some things, there are specific times that they have to be done, right? You have to be at work at a certain time each day, or, you may have to be home or picking up children at specific times. Some things throughout the day, we just know that there is not flexibility for. But there are things that you can kind of ebb and flow throughout your day. And so, deciding on what your hours look like when you're at work and when you want to be off, and really being honest about what works for you and those around you. And then just acknowledging that sometimes no is the right answer. And just reminding ourselves that, no leads to the opportunities for maybe someone else to say yes. And a clear or distinguished no from you is better than maybe a half-hearted maybe or yes, where you don't really have the time or you're not going to be able to be giving of your full self. Next slide. Prioritize what's important to you and let go of everything else. And this can be hard. So really asking the question, what are your priorities and what is important to you? I think in today's world, this is especially hard, as there is always a push for success or, climbing to the next promotion. We live in a world of kind of, the rat race or pushing for the next best thing, or you're not allowed to say no. So really prioritizing what's important to you and letting go of everything else, giving yourself permission to being okay with not doing certain things. And so this is an example that I can really relate to. I love wellness and I love wellness program and this concept of, helping others to become their best selves or working towards their best selves. But you could say fortunately or unfortunately, I landed this position less than 2 months before I had my son. And so, that just changes the way you kind of, look at, your priorities. And at the start of the pandemic, we had our second child. And so coming back to a world of virtual work, I was able to go part-time. And so I've spent the last 2 years kind of working part-time, and that's great for me, but that means that I'm not as involved. I'm not, kind of on the cutting edge or the cool projects that we might be working on. I have, my responsibilities for coming to work and doing my job, but I'm certainly, not in line for a big promotion or a senior consultant role. And so that's okay. I'm coming to work and I'm doing my job, saying no to some things, and that just allows me to be more present with my family at this time, which is what my, priority is. So next slide. using one calendar for personal and professional appointments, right? So this is a really practical step and one that definitely wouldn't have aligned with the idea of work-life balance. But doing this allows for blocking out, physical activity, doctor's appointments, maybe school events, alongside maybe other work responsibilities. And so you might not do this on, your, a calendar that you have at work, although you could block off those times. But I know I do this on my phone calendar, where I merge my work calendar onto my personal calendar so that I can look at my day and see when I have work calls and when I have work presentations, but also where I can kind of step aside from those and take care of some personal commitments. And so I love this last point. It keeps your personal commitments as sacred as your professional ones. So maybe you are able to kind of ebb and flow or weave in some time for self-care or exercise throughout the day. And so using one calendar kind of really helps you practically hone in on this idea of work-life integration. Next slide. Pursue activities and opportunities that energize you. And so, this is where you may need to approach your employer about desired changes. Maybe that's, a more flexible schedule, different projects, remote work, if that's an option. And then coming prepared with suggestions, not just demands or complaints. So, thinking about what inspires you, what you need help with, what is working for you, what isn't working for you, and bringing along others in making those changes. There is a quote from a Pilates instructor that I just love, that I think we can apply, to, what energizes us. And she says, do the thing you need to do to feel the way you want to feel. And so what steps can you take to energize yourself, or make those changes, or have more of this synergy throughout your day or throughout your week? Next slide. All right, number 6, embrace work-life integration. This is kind of our final practical tip in what work-life integration might look like for you. So we know that trying to completely separate work and family life doesn't necessarily work, right? This is the idea of balance that we're kind of trying to move away from, because we know that it just creates increased stress and reduced productivity. So instead of focusing on work time versus personal time, focus on the best time to do things and be willing to experiment, right? This is something that is not just an instant fix, or you're going to instantly feel the benefits of it. It's going to take some time to kind of practice and experiment and see, what works for you and what doesn't. And so, just maybe a practical example here is, maybe checking your email when you can't respond is something that gets in the way of, trying to make time for family. So, really just working towards a synergy between these two. Letting go of, kind of this guilt is easier said than done, but it's essential for work-life integration and kind of the self-advocacy that goes with this idea. Next slide. So this kind of concludes our presentation on work-life integration, a more intentional work-life mode. I hope that you have found some of these techniques helpful or practical that you can kind of start to work into your day, or maybe this is something that you already do, but really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and I so apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning.
Mariah, thank you again so very much for taking your time out today to provide us with work-life integration content. Hopefully today, participants, you all received something that you can actually begin to implement in your day-to-day life, whether that be scheduling your personal and your professional on the same calendar, or really being intentional about how you isolate your space and time between the two. So thank you all very kindly.